This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Warning, if you are watching this video, that means you're books. Every now and then I like to talk about a book series that I love and that not many people maybe know about, even though the channel has just become an extended meme. Today I want to talk about a writer who I have come to adore through multiple series, a hugely prolific writer named Lawrence Block. He's written over 100 novels, truly a master of his craft. He was a contemporary of Donald Westlake, and they were actually friends. Donald Westlake, I talked about being the writer of the Parker series. Today I want to talk about the Scudder series, Matthew Scudder. They're a detective series. I think there's 16 books in the series. They were begun in the 70s, and they haven't ended because Lawrence Block is still alive and writing, but we don't know if there will be any more. But before I get to my next point, I do want to talk about Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creators. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity with Skillshare. Skillshare has been my longest and most consistent sponsorship. I'm very grateful and very happy to be working with them. I love using Skillshare, and I just want to recommend a couple classes that I have enjoyed that I think you may enjoy. I've recommended this before. I'll recommend it again. The Writer's Toolkit, 6 Steps to a Successful Writing Habit by Simon Van Boy. I mean, setting up your writing routine is like super important and figuring out what works for you. You can have more of a strict type of schedule or a loose schedule. I mean, the process is so subjective. Like, I don't, so this I thought was a very useful series, and I really enjoyed watching it. Also, Nathaniel Drew, a YouTuber I really like, has a Skillshare original. It is called Document Your Life, 4 Methods to Live More Intentionally. Very informed and had a great polish and was really fun to watch. So do check that out. You can do it in bite-sized videos or watch the full course. It's curated specifically for learning, meaning there are no ads. They're always launching new premium classes so you can stay focused. Skillshare now offers classes in Spanish, French, Portuguese, and German.
You may know Skillshare for classes in photography, film, and video editing, and illustration, but did you know that Skillshare has hundreds of career-focused classes too? The new year is the perfect time to reinvent your goals and yourself. Traditional work and jobs are not one-size-fits-all. Learn how to design a career to fit you.
The first 1,000 people to click on the link in the description get Skillshare for free for 1 month. What are you waiting for? Go just click on it and enjoy. Learn something new. Thank you, Skillshare. Now, back to the stuff. Lawrence Block was in a generation of like crime fiction writers who started out in pulps just writing whatever. He started out writing erotic fiction. So did Donald E. Westlake, and they wrote under many pseudonyms. Basically, the erotic fiction that they wrote back then compared to now would be like nothing. Like, I'm sure HBO, the regular HBO show has things way more explicit than what was in these erotic books, but that's where they got their start. And Lawrence Block always intrigued me, and I was really drawn to people like Lawrence Block and Donald Westlake for their ability to move between genres, to write prolifically and at an extremely good craft level, blending crime and humor. Donald E. Westlake had his comic Dortmunder series along with all of his other comic crime novels, but he also wrote, as Richard Stark, the Parker series, which is like the hardest of hard-boiled noir fiction. Go check out my video on Parker if you haven't seen it yet. Lawrence Block kind of had that same thing, it seemed to me. He had Bernie Rodenbar. Let me see. Yeah. He did the Burglar series, which are sort of like light, fun novels. I think this is signed. Oh, yeah. This is signed. Just bragging, I guess. But what I loved about Lawrence Block was this ability to change voices and write in such different tones and styles and be able to move between those. I think, to me, that shows like a mastering of the craft. There is artistry there, but like to do it at that level, you have to be insanely good. Amazing to see. And you start to see patterns in their work. I love like super prolific writers. You can pick and choose what you like, and not everything's great, but you gravitate towards certain things. At first, I gravitated towards a character called Keller, the Keller series, which is about a hitman. I would say that the show Barry was heavily influenced by Keller. I've talked about this series a lot. Mostly short stories collected into collections. The first one is called Hitman, and it's great. You should read those. Very dry humor. So I recommended those. And I was like going through reading some short stories. By the way, there's one Lawrence Block short story that I highly recommend. I believe it's called Going Through the Motions. Dark, kind of twisted story. When talking about Lawrence Block, everyone would say, yeah, Bernie Rodenbar is great, Keller's great, all his other, standalone books are great. But the real series, the real good stuff, is the Scudder series, Matthew Scudder. These are first-person stories about an ex-cop who does detective work in New York City. And to me, I went, that sounds really bland and boring, and they're serious and they're dark. They largely involve his alcoholism. A character study, basically, over a bunch of mysteries that, span a bunch of years. I didn't find this very interesting. I thought, well, I've seen the sad detective is obsessive and moody and whatever, so I was like, I don't know, I've seen this before. But you have to remember, I'm sure this was a very important development in the crime fiction genre. In my mind, when you look at American crime fiction, it starts with Hammett, who was a private detective himself before writing, and then it moves on to Chandler, who had his own stylistic stuff going on, and it moves on to Ross McDonald and John D. McDonald, the McDonalds. I think that Lawrence Block was a huge, and the Scudder series was a huge in developing what was the private eye character. Scudder isn't technically a private eye, but he functions that way. He takes favors. He doesn't need to worry about taxes, I guess. He kind of has an addiction to solving crime. He's chosen to isolate himself. But when I dove into the first book, just reading that first chapter, it's kind of electrifying how good that first chapter is and how it pulls you into this character and makes you feel immediately like this. There may be a mystery going on, but it's really about this narrator. And the narrator is going to reveal himself in very sly ways, very indirect ways, because this is a very suppressed person. Scudder is very suppressed. He's holding back a lot of pain and a lot of darkness. And we get to see that play out in how he solves these cases and how he goes about with his drinking. It's never super direct, and it's very slow to reveal itself. And there are multi-novel character arc going on for Scudder. So who is Matthew Scudder and what makes him different from any other private detective series you're going to read? So the series starts in the 70s, the mid-70s, very of its time in a lot of ways, not super, let's just say that the times have changed for good reasons. So they are gritty, and there's very dated stuff going on, as what you'd expect in any crime story from the 70s. Scudder was a cop who accidentally killed a little girl. One of his bullets ricocheted, and it was just a random thing, she was way out of range, but she just happened to get hit. So he took that very hard. He got divorced, moved into the city, and is living this isolated life in a hotel room, solving cases, doing private detective work for people who get recommended to him by his old friends or whatever. But he's basically just roaming around, solving cases, and dealing with his alcoholism. And early in the books, it's not even discussed as an issue. It's just he drinks. He has his whiskey, he has his coffee, he gets through the day, he drinks. Every scene, it's constant. It's amazing how you can have these self-contained stories, but and very entertaining. I'm not saying the mysteries are exceptional. They're good, especially the early ones. They're very good. Time to Murder and Create, I think, has a fantastic mystery. So they're engaging in that way. But the deeper thing is, how does this all affect Scudder? How does he process what he's seeing, and how is he dealing with what's going on? He can admit to himself that, and there's one scene very interesting early in the books where he admits that, I have a problem. And he's telling, someone he's seeing, he says, I drink, it's currently not a huge issue, but it's probably going to be an issue later on, just based on what I know about my patterns and behavior, and haven't completed the series. It's a long series. I don't want to complete it super fast. I've kind of been tearing through the books this year. I just completed the 5th book, 8 Million Ways to Die, and I don't think Lawrence Block was going to write more books after that. He just kind of got sucked into it again and figured out new ways to write about this character more. But it really goes through this arc where he's learning to accept what actually happened and how to deal with it in a healthy way. And 8 Million Ways to Die is absolutely the best book in the series that I've read so far. It has a great mystery with some great characters, but it's longer, and it has way more there to say about Scudder and about New York City and about dealing with trauma and dealing with the past. Scudder is actively trying, he's actively going to AA meetings, and we have the mystery, we have the AA meetings, and they both are competing for our attention because both are so interesting and kind of heartbreaking. And it's frightening, getting to see Scudder go through, this character who's so reliable and dependable, who we rely on and he relies on himself, to be self-sufficient. He's so isolated and self-sufficient, and that for him to finally be able to say, I need help, I can't do this alone. It's really just remarkable. And, you get to, you wouldn't expect this in like these crime stories, that by the end of this book, 8 Million Ways to Die, it's like you want to cry for this character. It's so sad but moving. It's just such a wonderful and like subtle portrait of this sad person. If you're not naturally drawn to like crime stories or mysteries because you want more character focused, I'd say Scudder is the way to go. However, the first 3 books are kind of not essential. Like they are good to read, but I do think that they started out as just like self-contained mystery stories. They're super quick reads, like Time to Murder and Create. I think this is the second one. This has a great story, great mystery that's about, there's a blackmailer who is friends with Scudder who tells him like, hey, if someone kills me, there are 3 people who I've been blackmailing. One of them would have done it. So if I die, please figure out who did it and then release this blackmail on them for killing me. It's like his insurance, Scudder is his insurance. So it's great, he's basically putting a target on his back to be like, okay, I'm going to go pressure these people who have been blackmailed by this other guy who just got killed. And whoever tries to kill me, that's probably who the killer is, So he kind of has a lack of regard for his own safety and well-being. Less than 200 pages. Really snappy read. The prose it's borderline invisible, and I know there's no invisible prose, but it is so it shows who his character is, but it is extremely simple. But that is who Scudder is. It's so direct and hiding so much underneath the simplicity. It's hiding a lot of complexity. For the next 3 days, I read the papers twice a day and waited for a phone call. Monday night, I picked up the early edition of the Times on the way to my room. Under the heading of Metropolitan Briefs, there's always a batch of crime items tagged from the police blotter. And the last one was the one I was looking for. An unidentified male, white, height approximately 5'6", weight approximately 140, age approximately 45, had been fished out of the East River with a crushed skull. The first book is called The Sins of the Fathers. Great mystery. There is a woman killed. We know who the killer is. We think we know who the killer is, but the father comes to Scudder because he wants to know who his daughter was before she was killed. She was, estranged from the family, etc. So a great mystery unfolds. A lot of dark secrets, family traumas, etc. I will say one big mark against the Sins of the Fathers, because it's a fantastic mystery. My one problem is that the conclusion is so 70s pop psychology bullshit, Freudian nightmare, very dated, very clumsy, an explanation that's satisfying, but the deeper, psychological stuff. I'm glad that got abandoned in the later books because Scudder's kind of doing some pop psychology on this guy. I'm like, can we? No. Just don't even go there. This is weird. So that's The Sins of the Fathers. Then we have Time to Murder and Create, which is about the blackmailer. I told you about that. In the Midst of Death is about a cop turned informant who's trying to root out the corruption going on in the police force. Very interesting details about, corruption, New York City cops, Scudder's relationship to that. But it appears like he's being framed for the murder of a prostitute. So Scudder is trying to solve that crime. The fourth book is called A Stab in the Dark, and this is definitely the second best next to 8 Million Ways to Die of the first 5 that I've read. A Stab in the Dark is about there's a murder that was supposedly done by a serial killer, but turns out to have been impossible once the serial killer's identity was found years later. This is a murder that occurred 9 years ago. The cops don't care about investigating this crime anymore. It was 9 years ago, but the father of the daughter comes to Scudder and wants him to investigate it and find out who the real killer is. It's called A Stab in the Dark because the whole thing's chances of solving this crime are so impossible, But Scudder does it anyway, partly because he's really struggling with his drinking. And this is the one where the problems around his drinking are really coming to light. It's becoming very clear. We get some characters that will stick around for some of the books. So if you just care about the more deeper psychology, if you don't really want to have those introductory 3 books, the great books, the first 3, but I really think books 4 and 5 are a great pair to see like the best of the early part of this series. A Stab in the Dark is fantastic. And then, of course, we get 8 Million Ways to Die, a book that is so fantastic and amazing. Like, I was talking mostly about the stuff with Scudder going to AA meetings. I didn't even mention the excellent stuff going on. There are these women getting killed, these prostitutes, and the weird, interesting dynamics with Chance, who is their pimp, and the weird relationship Chance and Scudder have. Really interesting dynamics, really great. The mystery is good for sure, but the book is really about like Scudder himself. A Stab in the Dark, 8 Million Ways to Die. 8 Million Ways to Die was turned into a film in the 80s, I think, directed by Hal Ashby, of all people. And you know, Scudder the whole series is about New York City, and hey, let's set this adaptation in LA. I have not seen this movie, full disclosure, but the clips I have seen of the movie, I cannot even see where it's from the book. Like, the book is so different. I don't even know how they adapted that from the same source material. I have no idea. But speaking of movie adaptations, we have 8 Million Ways to Die, very famous. It was a huge disaster, like box office wise, and was cut up by the studio. And anyways, that's a whole interesting thing you can dive into of that movie production. Another one is more recent. Liam Neeson played Scudder in A Walk Among the Tombstones. I have not seen that movie yet because I have not read the book yet. Here's a beautiful edition of that book, A Walk Among the Tombstones. If you want to watch a Scudder movie, I guess there's that. I can't attest to its quality. Here's another nice edition I have of A Dance at the Slaughterhouse. Anyways, I cannot recommend these books enough. I really think that if you like crime fiction, if you want to read some older detective stuff, that's also feels modern. Check out the Matthew Scudder series. Start with The Sins of the Fathers. Start with A Stab in the Dark. Whatever. If you want a different type of Lawrence Block, read his short stories. I mean, there's so much to explore if you like this kind of noir, if you like, it's just great. I cannot recommend Lawrence Block enough. Also great writing books, actually. Lawrence Block has written writing handbooks and stuff like that. So I hope this was entertaining somehow. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you again, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video, and I hope you all have a lovely day. Bye-bye.